A girl of unbelievable beauty was walking down the street, tapping her heels. She was not walking, but practically running, one might even say flying, jumping over puddles. It was a beautiful day, despite the fact that it had just rained a short May day, and water was splashing on the sidewalk. Immediately after the May thunderstorm, the sun peeked out, giving the world its warmth and cracking the faces of passersby with smiles. Where was this beautiful girl in a hurry? Her name was Alice. She was only 23 years old, and she hurried to her beloved husband. They got married just a year ago, and today was their anniversary. Alice's boss kindly released her from work a few hours early, and now she flew on the wings of love to her beloved. A romantic dinner, presents, and a pleasant night awaited them. Alice had already prepared her present. An expensive watch was in her purse. She loved Slava with all her heart. They had met in one of the clubs when she was studying at the institute. She liked a good-looking guy who tried to amuse her all evening, and she gave him her phone number. After a few dates, Alice was already in love with Slava, and 6 months later they were married. For a whole year, they lived soul to soul with Slava in his apartment. Slava worked as a car mechanic and earned good money. Elisa, too, got a very successful job at one of the consulting firms. She had to spend most of the day in a cramped office in the company of girls as pretty as she was, answering phones and advising rich clients of the firm. She got into her car, drove out of the office complex, and in an hour she was near her house. She didn't tell Slava she was coming early because she wanted to surprise him. Quietly, she opens the door of the apartment. She took off her high-heeled shoes before going inside and only then tiptoed into the hallway of their cozy two-room apartment. Now Slava would come out to her from one of the rooms or the kitchen, and she would pounce on him, Alice thought, and make him happy with her early arrival. But after a few seconds, she suspected something was wrong. Something wasn't right. There was a pair of women's shoes on the doorstep that didn't belong to her. Alice became alarmed. On a rack, she found a woman's coat unfamiliar to her, and there were strange noises coming from the bedroom. Upon listening, Alice realized that it could not be anything other than the sounds of cheating. In her and her fame's bedroom. Horrible thoughts immediately crept into Alice's head, but she pushed them away, not believing that fame could cheat on her. Not now, not on this day. It was simply impossible. She slowly began to make her way toward the bedroom door. As she approached, the woman's sounds began to intensify, joined by the quiet moaning of men. It was quite obvious that someone was making love behind the bedroom door. Alice quietly opened the door. A gap was formed, through which she could clearly see a man and a woman. They were passionately doing it on their and Slava's bed. The man was lying on his back, and the girl was riding him and riding on his lap. It was a searing brunette with long hair. Alice could not see the girl's face, but the man's face was perfectly visible. He kept his eyes closed, so he couldn't see Alice peeking at them. It was a glory. Alice could not believe her eyes. For a few seconds, she watched the passionate scene taking place outside the doors, theirs from the glory of the matrimonial bed. Then everything in her eyes blurred with the influx of tears. Alice literally bounced out the door, trying not to scream with grief. Grabbing her bag and shoes, not quite knowing what she did, Alice jumped out onto the landing and only there gave vent to her emotions, crying at the top of her throat. She literally howled, trying to hold back the scream that burst from her throat. "Slava, how could you?" she said in her head. "On a day like this. And it was your surprise." After about 20 minutes, her mind began to return to Alice. She got out of the entryway and just walked around the house for a while longer. "Why did you run away?" "I should have gone in and ripped all of that girl's hair out. I will never, ever forgive him for that." Gradually, from self-pity, Alice's thoughts began to swirl around revenge on her lover, and to take revenge on him immediately, with the most brutal way possible. As the saying goes, a tooth for a tooth. The astonished woman's ego is capable of any sophisticated revenge. But Alice had no time to come up with cunning plans. Something clicked in her head, and the solution to the problem was born by itself. With trembling hands, she took the phone out of her purse and dialed the number of her boss. "Hello. Veniamin Mikhailovich," she said quietly when the call was answered. "No, nothing has happened." "Yes, will you come up?" And Alice gave the address where she was now. She spent the rest of the hour at the bus stop, staring at one point like a zombie. That hour flew like a second, and she was taken out of her stupor by a car horn. Alice looked up and saw her boss's shiny BMW. She jumped up, ran to the car, jumped into the front seats next to the driver. Veniamin Mikhailovich, sadly wide, the face of a man in his 50s, greeted her with a smile from ear to ear. It seemed that his fat kin was about to burst with joy. Alice just sat down in the front seats without saying a word and stared ahead as if nothing was happening. "Alice, what happened?" inquired Veniamin Mikhailovich. "I thought you were crying." "No, everything is all right," said Alice. But it was impossible to hide the fact that the girl was in a bad mood. Her eyes were red from crying, and mascara had run under her eyes. "Let's not talk. Let's just go to your place quickly," said Alice. "Whatever you say, Alice," replied Veniamin Mikhailovich. "I'm very glad that you agreed to meet with me," he said, and the car started. Alice took out of her purse makeup and, looking in the mirror, cleaned herself a little, wiped the mascara under her eyes with a damp napkin, corrected her disheveled hair. Only now her mind began to return to her. Why had she chosen her boss to get back at Slava? The fact is that she wanted to hurt him as much as possible, and her boss from work, like no one else suited for this. Veniamin Mikhailovich was the one who got her the job. She passed one of the steps of the interview with him, and he almost immediately hired her and introduced her to the team of the company. Once there, Alice immediately understood why Veniamin Mikhailovich accepted her so easily. It seemed that he selects employees to his department, not because of knowledge or other professional qualities, but solely for his personal sympathies. His entire department, which he managed, was just beautiful and stunningly beautiful girls. Alice was one of them. With her long legs, her pretty face, she was quite the stunningly beautiful type. But she was not a dumb blonde. She just did not sit behind her desk, right away, starting to benefit the company with her work. She was diligent in her duties of calling and talking to customers, so she thought she was fairly well paid. Veniamin Mikhailovich could by no means be called a handsome man. He was short, almost a head shorter than Alice. He was fat, or rather chubby and bald. He had 3 or 4 hairs on his head, which he carefully licked, and on top of everything else he wore glasses. All of his facial features were somehow greasy and oily. His nose was greasy, his lips were greasy. Even his eyebrows were strangely protruding forward and looked greasy. In a word, he looked like a common pig. The girls in the department nicknamed him so in conversations among themselves, calling him our piglet. And with all this, Veniamin Mikhailovich was a real ladies' man. He never forgot to compliment all the girls in the department, sometimes trying to pinch someone on the ass or hand hugged her waist. However, all his advances were quite innocent and bearable. Veniamin Mikhailovich never crossed a line. However, Alice knew for sure that several girls in the department had slept with him. She could not understand how it was possible, but it was no secret to anyone in the department. Women can't keep quiet, so after a few months of working in Veniamin Mikhailovich's department, Alice knew everything about everyone. 3 of the girls in the department were Veniamin Mikhailovich's mistresses. There was no proof of this, but everyone just knew it. Well, thought Alice, there would always be those who would sleep with a man, just because he is above them in status, especially if it is your boss. One day, Veniamin Mikhailovich launched an attack on Alice. Compliments and small gifts do not count. Alice got used to them long ago. But at one recent corporate party, Veniamin Mikhailovich openly began to flirt with her. And when Alice openly started to avoid him, he still caught up with her in the smoking room and they had a little dialogue. Or rather, Alice had to listen to a speech Veniamin Mikhailovich. He told her that he was not a boy to play all sorts of games, that he really likes Alice and would like to sleep with her. But he will not insist and pursue her and certainly put a spoke in her wheel at work. His confession won't affect their working relationship in any way. But if Alice suddenly changes her mind, she can always call him, and then she will be very surprised to find herself in his bed. In addition, then she expects a perk at work and a significant raise in the form of monthly bonuses. Alice only laughed, translating everything into a joke, but it was obvious that although Veniamin Mikhailovich was slightly drunk, he was quite serious. Several weeks had passed since then, and the conversation was still fresh in the memory of both Alice and Veniamin Mikhailovich. So he knew at once what she was talking about when Alice called and said she agreed to his proposal. He immediately snapped on a date with such a beauty. And now Alice was sitting in his car and they were driving to his house, and that's what she wanted. She wanted to cheat on Slava with such a worthless and unattractive man as Veniamin Mikhailovich, to hurt Slava as much as possible. Besides, she had no time to look for other options now, so she was fishless and Veniamin Mikhailovich was a fine fish. After that incident at the corporate party, Veniamin Mikhailovich no longer pestered her and behaved decently in his usual way. Only complimented her and smiled enigmatically when meeting her. This man did not inspire any danger, and Alice did not even think of quitting for such a small thing as a slightly anxious boss. "We have arrived," said Alice out of thought. Veniamin Mikhailovich. She woke up and got out of the car. Veniamin Mikhailovich parked in the parking lot of an elite high-rise. They took the elevator to his floor and a few minutes later found themselves in his apartment. Veniamin Mikhailovich, like a true gentleman, opened the door for Alice, and she entered the wide corridor of the luxurious apartment. "This way, Alice, please come in." Veniamin Mikhailovich gently took Alice under his elbow and led her into the bedroom. The room was rich, furnished with all sorts of vases, pictures, and antiques. A flat-screen TV hung on the wall, and in the middle of the room there was a king-sized bed with several large pillows and covered with a flesh-colored plate. Veniamin Mikhailovich immediately led her to the bed and sat her down next to him. "Alice," said Veniamin Mikhailovich, "I do not like your mood. Are you upset about something?" "You must be nervous," said Veniamin Mikhailovich. "Maybe I should pour you some wine to relax you." A big smile never left his face. Alice looked into his eyes. He had already taken off his glasses and put them on the nightstand, and now squinted his eyes at her. Alice suddenly felt disgusted and almost vomited at the thought that now she would sleep with this fat, sweaty man. "Better than vodka," she said, not even realizing how the words came off her tongue. Veniamin Mikhailovich opened the bar in the cupboard, and Alice was amazed from the number of different bottles standing there. There was cognac, vodka, brandy, some wines and liquors, everything the soul could desire. Veniamin Mikhailovich obviously doesn't miss evenings, Alice thought. Her boss took out a large bottle of vodka and poured its contents into a glass. Rather, the glass fell into the hands of Alice. A little wrinkled, she swallowed a volley of scalding liquid, feeling the hot heat spread across her chest, and at the same time, a nauseating feeling was born. She coughed, and still not completely coughing, decided that she could not cheat on Slava, no matter how much she wished it. Not like this, and not with this man. "Veniamin Mikhailovich," she said, "forgive me, I probably shouldn't have done this. I'd better go." And, trying not to look into his eyes, Alice tried to get up. Suddenly, she felt a push in the shoulders and her body with her back thrown back on the bed. Veniamin Mikhailovich roughly pushed her on the bed and already took off his jacket, leaving her in a tie shirt. He did not say anything, untied, pulling his tie from his neck, But Alice saw his eyes and immediately understood everything. She would not leave here easily. There was so much desire in that look, so animalistic, that Alice was even frightened for a moment, not recognizing her sweet and always friendly boss. Veniamin Mikhailovich tore his tie off, then pulled down his shirt. Alice had a view of his naked torso. On a huge belly was a few folds. After taking off his shirt, Veniamin Mikhailovich did not take off his pants and climbed onto the bed, hovering over Alice. She tried to crawl away from him, but he grabbed her legs and pulled her to him. "Don't, please, Veniamin Mikhailovich," Alice squeaked. "Relax, girl," heard his soft, hypnotizing voice. "Everything will be fine. I'll do it myself. You'll like it." "You're crazy," the last thing she whispered before her thoughts of glory finally switched to the feeling that arose in her body. God had not blessed Veniamin Mikhailovich with beauty. Since childhood, he had been the ugly duckling among his peers, but nature had given him a tenacious, sophisticated mind, which he had learned to use to the fullest in this life. In addition to his brains, Veniamin Mikhailovich had an incredible pure love, and as Friedrich Nietzsche would say, a desire for power. Such a punchy character allowed him to rise in life. He always knew how to overstep any person, even the closest one, for his own benefit. He was married 3 times. He had several children from different marriages, but now he has long ago got rid of the bonds of marriage, having divorced his last wife about 6 years ago. Having taken quite a senior position in a reputable company, he was a total master of his department. He never had any problems with women, strange as it may seem. He had long ago developed a theory for himself which worked 100%. Yes, he was not handsome, and women didn't line up for him in bed for his looks. But in his position, he knew how to get women to sleep with him. He never asked women for anything or begged them. It was useless. His theory was that women had to offer themselves and the various benefits that awaited them from their intercourse with him. In doing so, he constantly kept women in his midst, toned down, letting each one know that he was interested in her. Alice was special. Such a handsome man is hard to meet in real life. They usually grace the covers of glossy magazines. Tall, slender, with a pretty face and long curly hair. She conquered Veniamin Mikhailovich at first sight. He did not hesitate to take her in the hope that this bird would one day fall into his clutches. And the fact that his plan worked so easily was a real stroke of luck. When it was over, they lay on the bed exhausted, and Alice's stupor was brought out by the sound of the phone ringing. Her purse phone, which she had placed on the nightstand next to the bed, rang. Alice barely got out from under Veniamin Mikhailovich, only halfway, so she was able to reach into her purse and pull out her phone. The display showed Slava calling. The cheater called. For a few seconds Alice hesitated, but then firmly pressed the button to take the call. "Hello, Alice, where are you?" Her husband's native voice sounded in the tube. "I have long been home and waiting for you. Your main car is in the yard, and you're not there. Where did you disappear to, Alice?" "I went away to prepare a surprise for you, my love," Suha Alice answered. "Darling, I don't need any presents," Slava shouted. "Come quickly, I also have a huge surprise for you. I wanted to wait for you, but I have no patience. In short, my twin brother and his girlfriend came to visit me, and I want you to meet him." At this moment, Slava was talking with Alice in the kitchen, and next to him, there was a man who looked just like him, with a brunette girl sitting on his lap. They looked at each other while Slavik was talking on the phone, smiling and sometimes kissing. "Slava, what twin brother? Why didn't you ever tell me about him?" Alice stammered out. Veniamin Mikhailovich again lay down on top of her with his arms around her, almost choking her, and began to kiss her neck. "I didn't tell you because I wanted to surprise you on our anniversary." Slava's voice came over. "My brother moved to New York long ago. We rarely see each other." "Where are you, Alice? Come quickly. Didn't you say you could get off early? Alice, can you hear me? Alice. Alice. Everything Slava said no longer mattered to Alice, because now she rolled over on her back, not embarrassed, kissed her boss, a man who has fully revealed her essence. Now her body belonged to him.